Hello, my name is Carl Surrey, and this is a video tutorial of sorts for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. I say a tutorial of sorts because this is part of a challenge that I set for the group, whereby I have supplied this image and I wanted people to edit it in their own way, just to show how many different versions of the same picture you can get by people's preferences and how they edit a program, whether they use a filter or whether they use adjustment layers or however they want to edit it. So that was the whole point of the challenge, and I thought this was quite a challenging picture because the top half of the picture is quite bright and blown out to a certain extent because I was shooting sort of almost straight into the sun, although the sun was sort of hidden by some clouds, which also made the foreground a bit dark, especially some of these bushes along this edge here. So I thought it was quite a challenge in that sense for people editing to try and get a good balance between the brightness of the top and the darkness of the bottom. You could use whatever method you wanted, and I did make a folder on the website Facebook page, which if I just drop this down, this is the Facebook page for Fans of Serif Software, and along the top here you've got the discussion, members, events, photos and files. If you click on the files section, here you have all the mainly written tutorials. There are some videos as well which can be downloaded, but I have also added that image in JPEG version and RAW version, which again you can download and then edit to your heart's content. In the photos section, if you click on albums, one of the albums is Photo Challenge. You click on that. There are currently 4 versions in here of the same picture: the original, my version, I believe that was Eric's version, and this one I've not seen since I last looked. I'll have a quick look at this. Oh, there's. Oh, so Eric has done another version. Yeah, so he's done 2 different versions there. So if you do have a go at this challenge, you can just put your version into this folder, and then we can compare the different types of images that can be got from just one file. So if I go back to this, now this is the JPEG version that I've got up here, and I'm going to just very quickly show you how I did my version, which I used the raw version of the file. So I'll just close this down and then I will come back with the raw version opened up in the import raw panel. Welcome back. Now this is the raw version that is opened up in the import raw panel. And as I said before, the challenge here is to keep some of the detail in the top half of the picture while bringing out some of the brightness in the bottom half of the picture. Now my original plan when I did this was to process this image 3 times, once to try and make it look normal, for want of a better phrase, and then a darker version and a lighter version, and then to HDR merge them. That plan didn't really go well. I'm not a big fan of the HDR merging process in PhotoPlus. and it proved yet again to be not to my liking. So I went down a different route. What I did is I processed it twice, and I then blended those two images together and tweaked it a bit after that as well. So I'm not gonna necessarily explain all the alterations I've made, and I did make notes, so I might sort of lose where I am sometimes when I look down to see the settings that I set it on. So the first version I did was to make a very colourful image and brighter, and then the second image was a much more detailed image but a bit darker, and then the way they are blended should hopefully give you a more colourful and brighter image overall. So the first thing I did on the first image I did was just click in the noise reduction, but I'm not going to make any changes to the noise reduction settings. I will just accept what is set there. I'm going to leave it on daylight white balance, and then on exposure in the lighting section I move that up to 1.0. As you can see, like the sky is now totally blown out, but what I'm trying to do is to bring out the detail in the foreground. This image is probably more for the foreground. The highlights I moved up to 15, and the shadows I moved up to 40, and the black point I moved to 20. The saturation I moved up to 70%, quite high, because like I said, I wanted this version to be the colourful and bright version. And obviously this, if you were actually doing this picture, just the once, you wouldn't have kept it like this. I mean, it is too colourful and too bright, but it does give me the colours I want to bring out in these darker bushes, because they are reddish colours. And so that is where I'm going to on that. Now the next one I changed was the hue saturation. But what I did is I altered channels, not the master, which is all the channels. First of all, I changed the red channel, and I moved the saturation up to 50. And then I went to the green channel, and again moved it up to 50. Next I went to the cyan, and I moved that up to 50. Which finally gave me a bit more colour in the sky, which I didn't have before. And the last thing I set on this version was the contrast, which I went minus 25%. So that was all the settings I did for the first version of this image. So I just clicked OK, and it will place that back into PhotoPlus. Now I need to save that image. Now I don't use save as, I use export. And for this, normally I would save in JPEG, but for this process I'm going to be saving it as a tagged image file format, or TIFF. And I've, depending on what your computer can handle, is how many bits of information. I made mine 32-bit, which will, as you can see up here, it will make a 69 megabyte file. If I go back to the JPEG, if I'd saved it as a JPEG file, you can see up here that it would have been 3.4 megabytes. So a lot of information and pixels would have been lost in the compression of making it a JPEG file. But if you use the TIFF format, it will save much more information, many more pixels, almost like a raw file itself. That may not be technically correct, but that is how I view the use of these files. So I'll just click export and then save it. Okay, I will come back, and then I will come back with and then show you how I process the second file. Okay, I have saved the more colourful version of that file in the TIFF format. It does take a little bit longer to save, or for my computer to save TIFF files, mainly because of their size. So rather than hang around waiting for it, I've gone away and come back, and I've preloaded the raw file again. Because I saved the other version under a new name, I've not altered the original, so I can always just bring back the original and start again. Now in this version, and like I said before, I want to make it a bit more detailed to try and give it that sort of almost HDR feel to it, and darker in especially the sky area, because I'm hopefully getting the brightness and colour for the lower area in the previous processing I've done. So again, I will just use the default noise reduction by just clicking on that button there, keeping the white balance again as daylight, and then exposure this time I'm going to lower it to minus 0.3, so it's not very far, just a small way just to make it darker in the sky. The highlights I'm going to move to plus 50. There. Shadows to plus 20. And the black point to plus 15. I'm not going to alter the saturation at all. On the hue saturation slider, now rather than alter individual channels, I'm going to alter the colors overall, so I'm going to leave it on master, and I'm going to move the saturation from this point rather than the saturation up there to plus 40. And the lightness to plus 10. The contrast I'm going to move up to plus 10%. And then lastly, to give the sharpness that I'm looking for, I'm going to use the unsharp mask option. By default it is set on 50%, but as I want this to be quite high, I'm going to boost this right up to 200%. And hopefully we'll give some more detail, extra detail in the image. So that is the last of the settings that I did for the second version. So again, just click OK. And then export again in the TIFF format, and this one again is going to be 70 megabytes, and then export. And as you can see, previously I saved it under a new name, so it was image 0578 colourful TIFF, and this time I'm going to call this one detailed. So I know there's a difference between those two images. So I'll click save. It will take a little while, so I will go away and come back. So I have now saved two versions of this file, both in TIFF format. The first one I called image 0578 colourful, and I've now opened that in PhotoPlus. And the other one, which I've also opened in PhotoPlus, is image 0578 detailed. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this darker version, and I do find it is better to use the darker version above the lighter version. It doesn't always work as well the other way around. I don't fully understand what difference it would make, but for my personal usage, I find it best to have the darker version above the more colourful lighter version. So I'll do select all, so you get the margin ends all the way around, edit, copy, and then go to the other version, and then edit, paste as a new layer. So now you have, as you can see down here in the layers display area, you have the lighter version at the bottom and the darker version at the top. Now this is where I'm going to change the blending mode of these two files to sort of merge them together. Now you can change the blending mode by where it says normal here. If you click the little arrow, you get all the different blending modes here. Now invariably when I've done this, I've always found that lightness is a very good option, but for this particular image it didn't work too well. So I then tried all the other ones. I'm not going to try all of them, but I'll just say, for example, pin light. That wasn't too bad. I mean, I still haven't got much in the sky up here, but the foreground is nice and bright. The one I actually ended on using was darken. So as you can see here, it now is a pretty much even across the sky and the foreground for brightness or darkness, depending on which way you're looking at it. Obviously the sun area up here, there's little I could do about that. There's no real pixels up there to work with, so it's just a white area, so I'm not too worried about that. So what I want now is to add a couple of adjustment layers just to help bring this image up. So what I'm going to do is go down to this half black half white circle down here, and I'm going to select brightness and contrast. The tool for the brightness and contrast will be here, and the settings I used was I moved the brightness up to 37. 37, and the contrast I moved up to 23. Okay. Right. So now you can see it's much brighter overall, and it's not too bad a picture, and I could have just left it there. But I did make one final adjustment layer, which was a levels one. Now, when you move either the shadows, the midtones, or the highlight pointer, the numbers up here will alter accordingly. To save time, I will just type in the numbers that I used. So I'll just highlight that, and this was on 236, and this was on 0.988. And that is where I stopped making any more alterations, and this is what should be the exact same image that I have put into that folder that I mentioned earlier. And as you hopefully you can see, it's the same sort of brightness at the top and the bottom, but I've also boosted the colors, especially on the bottom area, so you can now see the reddish bushes and the much greener grass, while still trying to keep some of the blue in the sky. It may not be a perfect edit, and the whole point of this challenge is to get different versions of the same picture. So I look forward to seeing your versions. So all you need to do now is to merge these layers down, and then I must admit, this happened when I did this before, is there's a slight white line coming down the left hand side, so all I did was crop it just to lose that white line down the side. I don't know quite why that happened, but it was only a very minor glitch, and it doesn't alter the end result. So once you have merged, and if need be cropped or straighten the horizon, if whichever you want, how you ever want to edit it, then just save the file under a new name. Right, I hope that has been of some help. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed the challenge, and goodbye.